Please join me for a section-by-section exploration of Paul Czege's The Clay That Woke.
We're going to continue now with the second installment of our series on The Clay That Woke. Part 1 finished on page 48, and that was where the topic of the crater of lots, the oracle that governs how conflicts are going to play out, how situations are going to be resolved. That's where it's introduced on page 48. In this video, part 2 is going to continue on until page 98, and most of page 98. So it's a pretty big chunk of text. Now, most of this chunk of text is an admixture of fiction and direct discussion or direct communication from the author to the reader in two different voices, or at least it seems like two different voices. We have the voice that's giving you instructions, and we have the voice of the person sitting next to you who's run the game before. And they're interspersed with fiction throughout the book. So on page 48, it introduces the crater of lots, and quite simply, this is a bowl in which you put the tokens, or from which you withdraw tokens. And it seems like, the way that this is first described, that the crater of lots is also a location in the game, right? The crater of lots is a small polished bowl carved from the wood of a fallen watcher. It has a short inward lip and is eternally clouded with mist, as if it harbors the atmosphere of a primal rainforest. Then it says, it is used with the game's tokens as an oracle and circumstances called inflections, and that is a bolded game term. And also when a minotaur finds himself with no silence tokens left in his supply to inform how events play out. That's one paragraph which starts out seemingly with an in-world description and finishing clearly with game instructions, including the use of tokens in the text and bolded terms. So now that we've been introduced to the tokens here and also in the text, now they only appear as icons in the text. So it forces you to learn, and I think that's a good idea. So this section on page 48 is dancing in and out of fiction and direct communication. Then on page 49, we go fully into fiction to talk about this kind of thing, right? When the minotaurs, whose personal philosophy is this concept of silence, when they break silence, or when they are exposed to minotaurs who have reached this state called frantic as a result of having broken silence, they are compelled, or maybe they feel motivated proactively to head out into the jungle in order to deal with that, because that condition of being frantic can be disastrous upon those around them and can lead to them being killed as a result, right? Because they're out of control, large, dangerous, horned animals, sentient beings, sapient beings. So we have fictional discussion of that condition combined with art, and we see more of the author's attempt to make this feel like a full world of experience. It's not focused specifically on something like, like gladiatorial games or power positioning or exploration or something like that. It runs the gamut of social experiences, attraction, rejection, confusion, plus the jobs, plus the dangers of the environment, and one's own personal ambitions and the philosophical need to resist those ambitions. On page 51, it starts telling you, the reader, about the jungle. And it, once again, resorts to names. And it says that the people in the Degringoglade don't have a name for the jungle, don't have a specific name for the jungle. So that implies that it's the jungle. But that the externals, the humans that have devolved to the point where they live in the jungle, or who perhaps have always lived there, they refer to the jungle by a name or by a term that the book tells you means madness. But for the Minotaurs, returning to the jungle, or going into the jungle, is the way that they can recover from this maddened, frantic condition, find themselves again, restore their sense of silence, and therefore can then come back into polite human society. So it puts the jungle in a very interesting space, and so you recognize right away that you're going to need to be able to describe and operate within the jungle. And so that's exactly what this part begins to do. It discusses the common experiences, things that you would regularly find, things that the author chooses to employ when he runs the game, and that sort of thing. So animals, plants, conditions, situations.
So I thought for this part of the video it might be appropriate to go outside to a more rustic, decayed, and collapsed part of my environment. And of course, as soon as I hit record, a jet decides to fly over, but maybe that's appropriate. This part I wanted to talk about the setting and kind of take another step toward this discussion about immersion and its role, or possible problems in this game. Ostensibly, if we look at the back cover text, we might be expected by the designer, by the author, to immerse in character. And if that is indeed what is intended, what about this game is going to bring that about? Well, I'm going to start by looking at the setting. Now, this is a ruined civilization, a civilization in decline. Technology is fading away. The jungle is slowly reclaiming parts of the city. So, it is a location of past glory, and its citizens are described as speaking about present stories and past stories as if they all just happened. They are, let's say, deeply connected to their history. And then we have the city's name, right? This is a made-up city. It's a made-up city in a made-up world with made-up cultures and made-up creatures. And then we have its name. Is its name also made up? Well, I mean, we know the word. It's a real word with a real meaning, and that real meaning applies directly to this setting. But in the fiction, would it? Degringolade has a meaning of a place that has fallen. And this city, as described, is a place that has fallen, and this is the name chosen by the author for this place. Now, why I bring this up in connection with immersion is that we're now connecting a real-world language as a place name in a fictional setting. And that real word's meaning applies, as if the present people named their current situation that way on purpose. And so a duality is set up, a duality that puts you between your real world player self and the in character position that possibly the game is encouraging you to try to explore. And creating that duality, well, does that help the process or does it hinder it? We'll talk about it more later.
Page 55, it continues speaking to you directly. And page 56, there's another section, right, that continues speaking to you. And each one of these things introduces a new element, right? So here's the crater, right? These are the most common use of the crater is dealing with the situation of the frantic, and these tokens go into it or come out of it. And then here's something else that's going to happen, and here's something else that's going to happen, and these are the tokens that are involved in that. And it introduces it to you that way. And finally, it brings us to the three voices, the red voice, the bright voice, and the still voice, and the role that they play, this kind of mystical, disembodied, spiritual experience that happens when you're in the jungle. All right? And this is where the game reaches the vaguest part so far from the beginning. And it actually becomes the author, as I mentioned, telling you, like you're sitting side by side, things that they have done to bring this concept about in games. So it's less so giving you an instruction of how to bring this about, and simply giving you a personal example of how it was done once, which is interesting. I believe the effect that this is going for is to give you the confidence, the encouragement to go ahead and take the leap of faith, to bring this about according to your understanding of it. Will that work for all readers? That's a good question. Is this a game for all readers? Is another good question. All right, so after we've talked about the voices, we get back into fiction. Right? And that takes us from page 60 quite a ways to page 65. And then we're back into discussing the Crater of Lots again. And here it's much more direct. It says the Crater of Lots is an oracle you use in Clay That Woke to inform how you play out certain situations. As a player, this is what you do. As a game master, this is what you do. And the situations where you're interacting with the crater are called inflections. So some of this is repeated text or paraphrased text. So the concept of repetition as a learning tool is definitely in force. Right? Sometimes it's just a repeated phrase in part or as part of some form of communication. But as you go through the short amounts of text, you are reminded, hey, I read this before. Oh, I read that before, and I know what it means. And then gradually, it stops reminding you and just starts using the terms. So this is an effective learning tool. All right, so it's giving you situations that qualify as these inflections, these things that require using the Crater of Lots. And now we're moving past page 70, and pages where all sorts of tokens are filling up the text are becoming more and more common, and the art continues. Full page art breaking up the vastness of the single column text. While we're here talking about the single column text, one thing I'll mention is that while it is readable on your typical portable digital device like a phone, it's not the best experience. There's some sliding back and forth, or the text is really, really small, or you need a larger device, or why didn't I just bring the book has been my experience. All right, so we move past 71. We've now introduced the game term of foreshadowing, sort of. But on page 72, 73, we get a menu of how to interpret the tokens when you're using the Crater. And then these are explained in greater detail as we move through the 70s. Some of it is suggestion, some of it is direct instruction, do this. All right, and we keep going until we get to page 82, is that right? Yes, 82, new fiction starts to further cement the concepts that have been presented to us. And then on page 84, we have a negative example, right? So all of these introductions, like the Crater does this, and the Crater does this, and the Crater also does this, and we also use the Crater for this, and let's talk openly about using the Crater. And now on page 84, we get to, but the Crater is silent on violent conflicts or disagreements between player minotaurs and about the deaths of Game Master characters, and what happens if you draw a combination of tokens that doesn't match even a single outcome, or if, you know. So it very clearly spells things out of where we're not going to be using the Crater, and then goes into a couple of pages talking about, well, what to do in that situation. Handy. And then more fiction, very short, on page 87. We get, again, the guy who's run the game before talking to you, the reader, about how long sessions might last, and that sort of stuff. And then more fiction, right, on page 88. So just really short bits, transmitting the game concepts directly, transmitting the setting concepts directly, using these different modes of communication. This brings us through 90, 91 in fiction, 92 fiction, and then 93, we have when a group of minotaurs finds themselves in the jungle, do this, all right? And so clear instruction again. 94 brings us back into fiction, reinforcing those points. And then on page 98, which is the last we'll cover in this video, it asks us, what do we, the reader, make of what just happened in the fiction? So now we're interacting with the setting, right? We've moved through the game communicating directly to us, and now it's asking us rhetorical questions and specifically forcing us to think about what it was that we just read in the context of learning the game, right? So it's asking us, what do we make of the chimera that a character sees in the jungle? And the author tells us that he's not sure if he fully understands, but it's important, and these are some of the things that it might mean. And this is what it means to be handling concepts like that as the game master of this game. And that's where we're going to stop. The last thing I'll share, it says, it's about submitting to the mechanics of an alien world and engaging a primordial ability to communicate across the boundaries of your human differences with other players to find progressively the mutual incitement of your essences. Accept no substitutes. You're going to have a great time. And what that is in connection with is a description of what play is not about. So, hidden away in here is the author's idea about the play state, the condition of play, and how we get to what something, this concept that was considered important enough to put on the front and back covers. But we'll talk about that more as we go through the series. Thanks for watching.